Well, it looks like the RX 7800 XT is real and coming soon from AMD. This is thanks to what appears to be accidentally launching a product page early at PowerColor, showing off their Red Devil RX 7800 XT on their website. This was tweeted out by All the Watts. Sorry, I probably just blinded you with a black background. But anyway, what does this tell us? Well, I mean, we do get to look at one of the nice cooler designs and all of that. But is there any useful information in here for just telling us about the 7800 XT? Well, if we scroll down here, I mean, we get a whole bunch about the Red Devil cooler and all of that, but nothing seems that different than what we would normally expect here. However, we can take a look at the specifications page, and that actually does tell us a bit of what to expect from the 7800 XT. It does tell us that it will be a 16 gigabyte card. It does tell us that it will have 3,840 stream processors, which is now going to let us figure out a whole bunch of other stuff out about it. The memory clock goes to 18 gigabits per second. We can see the clock speeds, both game and boost. And again, the Red Devil card has a silent mode and an OC mode, so we can see the differences there, all of that. So again, the OC mode would probably be specific to the this model of the card. Anyway, so we get a whole bunch of info there. Now, what would we compare this to? Well, one thing that would be interesting is if we swap over to the 6000 series from AMD. If you look at the RX 6800, not the 6800 XT, but the non-XT, you'll notice that this also has 3,840 cores and, 16 gigabytes of memory, all of that. So it does look, if you're just looking at a comparison to the previous generation, that at least in terms of the number of cores, this seems to be a direct follow-up to the 6800 non-XT, but now we are getting the XT attached in the naming scheme, and that's at least interesting to note. Now, if you want to look at this up against the rest of the 7000 series, we can now see how this kind of stacks up here. Now, this is from videocards.com. Also, all of my sources will be in the video description, so you can take a closer look at all of these. But videocards.com, when doing an article on this leak, did give a nice convenient table here, stacking up the 7800 XT Red Devil specs that we just got here up against the rest of the lineup. Now, we've got the 7900 XTX and the 7900 XT. And then I recently reported in some of my previous news videos that in China, AMD recently launched a 7900 Golden Rabbit edition, which was kind of interesting, and it is available worldwide from some system integrators, although not in every country at this point. For example, we're seeing the 7900 GRE is now listed as available in Australia. And I'd recently reported that it was available in Germany, but these are from system integrators. You're not buying the GPUs separately, although I'm sure at some point they will end up available on the market. Now, these were listed at $650 MSRP in AMD's announcement trailer of them. So I think the big question on the 7800 XT is, well, I mean, how fast is it and what does it cost, right? I mean, the two big questions, obviously. And while this is an interesting leak, it still doesn't completely answer those questions. Although you can certainly see that at 60 compute units, compared to the 80 compute units in the Golden Rabbit edition, 84 compute units in the 7900 XT, this is significantly cut down. Although it does look like its boost clock is higher than what we're seeing on the Golden Rabbit edition, which could help. They both have the 16 gigabytes of memory on the 256-bit bus and 18 gigabit per second memory speed, giving them both 576 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth. We don't have a price, which again is going to be the big deal. Now, this certainly to me looks like it's cut down enough from the Golden Rabbit edition that I would hope for a significantly lower price than the $650 that we're seeing here. Also, considering the 7900 GRE was, it was faster than an RTX 4070, which means in the reviews we've seen from China, which does mean it's faster than a 6800 XT. It wasn't by a huge amount, and losing this amount of compute units, I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about this card from a performance perspective. Like, is this going to be much faster than a 6800 XT? And you can buy a 6800 XT right now for around $500 and have been able to for a long time now, which already had the 16 gigabytes of VRAM, all of that. We would expect a bit more energy efficiency. You get the AV1 encoder, but what is the price going to be? That's my big question. So we'll have to wait and see on that with how it stacks up. Because I mean, like with the RX 7600, this specs-wise looks very similar to a 6600 XT, and also performs only a little bit better than a 6600 XT. So if specs-wise this one's a lot like a 6800 non-XT, and then you get a bit of a bump, is this gonna perform much better than a 6800 XT, if at all? So there's a lot of questions here. But anyway, certainly interesting. Now, when will we get this? I would imagine pretty soon if we're already seeing the product page accidentally being leaked, but we don't have official word. However, from AMD, we actually do get confirmation of new enthusiast class RX 7000 RDNA 3 GPUs coming in this quarter at least, although it's not a specific release date. Now, this is a article from WCCF Tech. Where are they getting their information from? It appears to be a direct quote from an earnings call from AMD's CEO, Lisa Su. Her exact quote is, "We are on track to further expand our RDNA 3 GPU offerings with the launch of new enthusiast class Radeon 7000 series cards in the third quarter." Now, one important thing to note here is the use of the word enthusiast class. Because as noted in this WCCF Tech article, when AMD's marketing discusses classes of GPUs, they refer to the 7900 series, the XTX and the XT, as ultra enthusiast. So you would expect the next step down to be enthusiast, and that would seem to fit with a 7800 class GPU. So everything's pointing to third quarter. But when in the third quarter, right? Sooner or later, we don't have any official evidence. However, evidence is showing up that AI-driven companies are buying up gaming GPUs, and this is coming from Tom's Hardware. Now, this is concerning a little bit. I mean, hopefully nothing comes of this, but so far, it seems like gamer demand on this generation of GPUs from both AMD and NVIDIA has been a lot lower than last generation, but a big part of that is last generation we had the crypto boom to deal with. So, with gamer demand low, we've fortunately, while the prices, the MSRPs on these cards haven't been exciting, we at least haven't seen them, being scalped on eBay at double the original MSRP and stuff like that. However, Tom's Hardware is taking a look at this tweet saying, AMD, unlike Qualcomm, is a joy to buy chips from. 7.38 petaflops of compute was delivered today, with exaflops more to come. Nice to see them more active on the ROCm GitHub. We are working on the layer above. Now, that is a lot of GPUs, and exaflops of GPUs would be, well, a lot more. So, So what exactly would this be? Now, the Tom's Hardware article does follow up on figuring out about how many GPUs that would be. So like the 7900 XTX, based on its FP16 performance, would be about 60 of these GPUs. But then if you're getting into the exaflops number, which is 1,000 petaflops of performance, they're seeing that, you could be getting into somewhere in the $20 to $60 million range if we're talking like, 2 exaflops or more exaflops than 2, right? Exaflops plural doesn't give us an exact number. But the point is, that is a lot of GPUs, and AI is really booming right now. I was also really interested that they're these were AMD GPUs, and they're mentioning Rock M and all of that for AI workloads. So anyway, I'm just hoping we don't see a repeat of, in external demand, in this case AI, last generation it was crypto, starting to inflate the prices of the GPUs, because I think the low market demand had started to see these GPUs reducing in price, and I would like to see that continue. Now, we'll just have to see how all that plays out. Now, AMD has announced a Radeon Pro W7600 and W7500 mainstream workstation RDNA 3 GPUs. I'm not going to focus too much on this because I focus on the gaming niche, really, gaming GPUs, not so much workstation GPUs. But I should at least mention that these are available. If you want to see a few of the specs numbers and all that, here's some of the official announcement from AMD. I think I'm in the way, so I'm just going to be like, here they're showing it stacked up against the W6600, and now we're getting into the 7000 series, how they're kind of splitting off into one with the same amount of compute units as last time. Versus going up a little bit more. You can see the price range, all of that. And yeah, getting a little bit more into all of those details. This info coming from videocards.com, but they're just repeating the press release that AMD had sent out regarding those products. Now, speaking of other GPUs, we're seeing an unreleased Intel Arc A580 desktop gaming GPU on par with the Radeon RX 7600 in a leaked test. Again, this is reported by videocards.com. Now, you might be like, wait, Arc A580, what is that? So when Intel originally introduced their Arc desktop GPUs, they had this slide, and we have seen the Arc A380, and we have seen the 770 8GB and 16GB, and we've seen the A750 card as well. But we have never seen the A580 actually launch as a product that anybody could buy, which is interesting. However, what we're seeing reported here is a Geekbench result being leaked showing the Intel Arc A580 graphics being run here. Now, if you look at the performance numbers on this, it's, only limited usefulness because it's just an OpenCL score. So this is not really a gaming benchmark or anything like that, but it does come close to the official ranking of the RX 7600, but we've seen that Intel's synthetic performance versus how they actually perform in gaming can be two very different things. But anyway, so that shows where this the A580 would fall in terms of all of these specs if it actually existed. There is a price gap from the A750 to the A380. So I mean, there could maybe be room for another GPU in there if Intel did eventually bring this to market. Now, speaking of Intel just bringing things to market, we do see Intel's just released Arc A750M and A530M graphics using the new ACM G12 GPU. So basically, these are mobile graphics, and they were using a GPU that we hadn't previously seen. But it does look like that is the G12 chip. Anyway, I don't think there's a whole lot interesting to say about it other than that, and that maybe Intel is bringing out a little bit more of their Arc lineup at this point. Now, we're seeing at WCCF Tech reported that AMD Ryzen 8000 Strix Point APUs utilize 12-core Zen 5 and Zen 5C hybrid configuration and Strix Halo with 16-core chiplet design. So we're seeing Ryzen 8000. Now, we're specifically talking APUs here. So that would be where you'd have your nice, strong graphics processor in there with the CPUs. And we're getting some leakers on Twitter or X or whatever the heck it is now talking about, okay, Strix Halo looks like a desktop Zen 5 with a different IOD. We're seeing, if you're asking, it's 8 plus 8 for the Halo part, meaning, and Strix Point would be 4 times Zen 5 plus 8 Zen 5C cores. So basically, we're just getting some idea of the core configurations for these upcoming APUs. I don't feel the need to get too far into detail on all of this. We're expecting a second half 2024 launch expected. So it'll be a while before we actually see any of that, and I'm sure we'll have more information at this point. I think this was just another article on the same topic. Okay, so I did want to mention, I have reported on Ratchet and Clank recently and mentioned that at launch, AMD's ray tracing was disabled because it looked like there had been crashing issues. There is now a specific AMD driver available specifically for Ratchet and Clank, although I don't think this is being pushed out in their normal driver update package. But if you happen to be playing Ratchet and Clank, I think you could go look for and grab this specific driver. It's mainly highlighting just support for Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart and fixed issues. Application crash or driver timeout may be observed while playing Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, with ray tracing and dynamic resolution scaling enabled on some AMD graphics products. So it looks like it's just issuing a fix for some of those issues, so you could take a look at that. Now, in other games I've been talking about recently, Remnant 2, which is an Unreal Engine 5 released game, and I mentioned that its performance was boosted greatly by upscaling, and the game developers did mention they had upscaling in mind for how to boost performance in the game. I also mentioned that I was disappointed at the lack of scalability within the other graphics settings. Going from all the way down to low compared to ultra does get you some performance gain, but not a massive performance gain. I would like to see more options to tweak the performance, and it looks like some modders have you covered. So there's a Remnant 2 graphics editor tool that I will be clear, I have not tested myself yet. I'm just seeing reported here in this article at WCCF Tech. But it says it lets you improve performance by disabling specific effects. Now, it looks like it gives you basically more options to tweak things than the game's actual graphics menu. And it looks like one of the really big ones in terms of performance is the screen space global illumination. And so there's a whole bunch of other sliders available and things disabled. Now, if you want just a lot more performance, because maybe you're like, okay, the game looks nice, but I just want, you know, I want to play my shooter at the highest FPS I can, right? That's what I care about. It looks like at least one screenshot is showing with screen space global illumination enabled. You're at 59 FPS in this scene. And with SSGI disabled, jumping all the way up to 81 FPS. Now, 81 versus 59 is actually a 37% performance gain by disabling that one setting. Now, in these still screenshots, it actually looks pretty similar between the two, although global illumination solutions can add a lot to the visuals of the game. But anyway, like I said, so it looks like at least in this one screenshot, we're seeing a 37% performance boost disabling that, that one setting. So if you're struggling to run the game and you want to get it running, maybe look into this. But again, I have not tested this tool out myself, so I cannot vouch for any of that. Just seeing it reported and thought I'd bring it to you guys since I've been talking about the performance of that game. Speaking of the performance of recent games, I have not had a chance to look at Baldur's Gate 3 myself, but it looks like it launched without FSR2. It apparently will get FSR2 support, but closer to September 6th. I think lining up with the PlayStation 5 release. So it looks like maybe they're going to focus more on getting the FSR2 implementation up and running along with PlayStation 5. So anyway, wait a little while, I guess, to get that. There's some talk about, you know, people getting it up and running on Steam Deck and everything. I do want to take a look at this game. I'm not sure necessarily on the channel. If it runs well, I'm not sure there'll be a lot to talk about, really. I don't know if you guys are interested in any of that. Testing of Baldur's Gate 3 on various GPUs or anything. No, I thought this article was pretty interesting. This is reported at tomshardware.com, but the original testing looks like it was done by the German outlet, I think they're German, Computer Base, talking about idle power draw on AMD GPUs. And this has been a talk ever since the 7000 series launched, that they had a higher than expected idle power consumption. Now, it looks like when Computer Base retested their power consumption metrics, they noticed a much lower power draw and were trying to figure out what happened. Because while they changed their measurement tools, they weren't expecting the measurement tools to have that large of a difference. And they also figured out that they changed their display, and the display in their new test had variable refresh rate, or FreeSync enabled, whereas their previous testing did not have variable refresh rate enabled when measuring the idle power consumption. And that seemed to be the variable, and it was up to 81% lower idle power consumption by enabling the variable refresh rate. Now, I would imagine that most of the gaming audience, watching my videos would have variable refresh rate enabled on their displays, but I would mention that you should definitely enable that, it looks like, to rein in your idle power consumption if you maybe haven't done so. And they have a whole bunch of interesting power consumption metrics that you could take a look at along with this. But I think the highlight was noting the massive difference between having VRR enabled and not when measuring the idle power consumption. Now, let's get into some other interesting stuff. So we'd seen for a while now, and I have no idea what this QR code is behind me right now, so I don't know. Don't scan that, just in case. I don't know. Basically, we're seeing a listing of the cooler that looks like it was made for the, it was going to be a 4090 Ti, or maybe it would have been called a Titan, that kind of thing. And we've seen this before, but what's interesting in this look at it is right here. Do you guys see that there's a third fan hidden inside the cooler? So it looks like, again, we'll probably not see this actual design launch at this point. But what's interesting is NVIDIA has their, two-fan design, one on each side that they've done on their Founders Edition. It looks like to try to keep that look, that visual look, they hid a third fan inside of the cooler itself, which I just find just really interesting. So I thought I'd at least, mention that. Now, other interesting new coolers and GPUs coming out. It's looking like at IT Home, this is machine learning translated from Chinese, I believe. They're looking at a version of the RX 6500 XT coming in with 8 GB of graphics memory, which is interesting because the 6500 XT up to this point has always been a 4 GB card. So this version would come in with 8 GB. Now, that won't make it perform better unless it was running out of the VRAM capacity, but maybe it would at least allow you to do things with it that you otherwise couldn't do. But I think whether this is interesting or not would really depend on the price. This is coming from Paladin, which I think is more of a Chinese type company. And again, this is reported in Chinese, so hopefully this is, interesting, but I don't know whether we'll be seeing this outside of China or not. Now, in other interesting GPU coolers, how about the RX 7600 Party Animals from Sapphire? I've been a fan of seeing a lot of just the less traditional gamery designs. So even if it's not going to go in one of my builds necessarily, I think that this is kind of interesting to see a different take on the gaming GPU. This one looks obviously to be targeting more kind of kid-friendly sort of build, and I'm all for the more interesting looking designs. Along that, it looks like Yeston, who has been doing this kind of cute pet design for a while now, are showing off their Cute Pet RTX 4060. So we could see a couple of these screenshots here, again reported by videocards.com. And it's looking like Colorful is launching a RTX 4060 Smart Mini GPU. Now, this again has, I think, an interesting look to it. So, like I said, I'm all for less traditional cooler designs being out there to enable some different looking sorts of builds. And yeah, I think that's what I got on the cooler models. So I also saw this article. It's really just talking about the Steam hardware survey, but it is an interesting stat. NVIDIA's GeForce RTX 4090 is 4 times more popular than AMD's Radeon RX 7900 XTX, again, according to the Steam hardware survey. The Steam hardware survey is interesting, again, how well it actually represents the full gaming market. There's always talk about how, you know, like, internet cafes and things like that could have a whole bunch of Steam accounts logging into the same gaming PC, possibly skewing results, all that kind of thing, and everything. But one thing that's interesting about this is actually that it's like the 7900 XTX, well, this is highlighting that the 4090 is 4 times more popular, okay. But this is actually, I think, the first time the 7900 XTX or any RDNA 3 GPU has entered the Steam charts month by month. So that's at least growing its market share from that regard. But anyway, it looks like the overall top cards are fairly similar to what we're seeing last time, with the 1650 still the most popular. The RTX 3060 coming in after that, followed by the 1060 and the 2060. The 3060 laptop, 1050 Ti, so still the most popular GPUs are still not necessarily massive powerhouse GPUs or anything like that. And I wouldn't say there's major changes to any of that coming this month. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is just more evidence that the new Nintendo Switch console, or new Nintendo console, whether they call that the new Switch or call it something else, this is Video Games Chronicle citing their own sources that they have talked to, that they're claiming are knowledgeable about the situation, is claiming that Nintendo is targeting 2024 for its next generation console, and that key partners have development kits ahead of the planned launch. Again, this is impossible to verify. It's just Video Games Chronicle claiming their own sources. But anyway, thought I'd at least throw that news in there because we've seen other hints pointing towards a 2024 launch for the next Nintendo console. Hope you guys found all of this useful and interesting. I'm certainly interested in when we will see this 7800 XT officially, and especially what is the MSRP, because again, all the specs pointing to something, you know, if it's not that much faster than a 6800 XT, which is already just around $500 on the current market, I don't know. Let's see how AMD plays this one. I'm a little nervous that they'll overprice it at first and then just cut prices over time, which at least they're willing to cut prices over time, but it'd be nice to just get some solid reviews and excitement going at launch for an exciting price to performance bump. We'll see if we get it. I hope all of you have an excellent day.